A man in dark sunglasses, wearing an expensive black suit and carrying a fine Italian suitcase, strode purposefully towards me. I could smell the expensive cologne radiating off of him before he reached me. The sun shined directly in my eyes as I stared at him, wondering where this would lead. "Hello, soldier," he said, shaking my hand with an iron grip. I saw his freshly cut hair and the slight bulge under his shoulder where he kept his pistol. The thought came rushing into my head, unbidden. "Looks like a Fed." "Good afternoon, sir," I said, saluting him briskly. He swatted away the gesture. "You don't need to do that," he said. "In fact, you may be done saluting and polishing boots forever, soldier. I have a potential job offer for you if we could speak in private." "What's your name?" I asked. "Agent Stryker," he said. "And I already know yours, Sergeant Toads." I looked into his mirrored shades, wondering what hid behind them. "I have a job for you, a real, God-honest career. You could be done with the Marines today if you want it." He looked over to the administrative building, the clear glass doors opening and closing as people came and went. He looked back at me, putting his hand on my shoulder in a fatherly way. "So will you listen?" "Yes, sir," I said, and we walked into the administrative building, the blast of cold air conditioning feeling like a drink of water after wandering around the desert all day. He found a small, unoccupied office marked conference room and motioned me inside, closing the door behind us. I sat down in the small, poorly padded chair on one side of the wooden desk, and he took the large, leather one across from me. From my vantage point, I could still see outside. Marines passed back and forth on their way to whatever duties they needed to carry out, and support personnel came and went from the admin building and medical ward across the street. They reminded me of ants, constantly rushing forwards for the good of the hive. From far away, the lines of soldiers even looked like ants. "So, Agent Stryker began slowly, Sergeant Jintao Toads. We finally meet." He said my name slowly, as if tasting its syllables, pondering what it could mean. "You certainly are an adept soldier. You graduated in the top 5% of your class from boot camp, and your IQ test shows you are in the top 1% of the American population. You have a bachelor's degree from UConn and also graduated at the top of your class there. Moreover, you have joint South Korean and American citizenship." I nodded at this, unsurprised. This was a man who did his research. "You speak fluent Korean?" "Yes," I said, nodding. "I speak Korean and English. I grew up with both of them." "Great," he said, clapping his hands together excitedly. "You are exactly what we need. I'm recruiting from the CIA, and we need someone experienced and competent, someone who speaks the language and understands the culture. Would this mission fit you, soldier? What do you think?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. It felt like this entire encounter had come out of nowhere. It had an unreal quality to it. I couldn't believe the CIA actually had an interest in me. "You won't be alone," he said quickly. "We have another, more experienced agent who would accompany you." I just stayed quiet. He pulled out a contract, showing me a paragraph marked with a handwritten star. "This is a one-time offer, Sergeant Toads. Either you sign now or you will never see us again." He pointed at the marked paragraph. I grabbed the contract, spinning it around and quickly reading it. The section he had marked discussed compensation, $70,000 a year, plus hazard pay, as well as potential bonuses for dangerous assignments. This was far more than my salary as a sergeant for the Marines, which was laughably small. "Okay, fine, I'm in," I said, smiling slightly. I shakily rose from my seat, and he did the same, extending his hand. We shook, and suddenly the future seemed bright, exciting, even limitless. I had 18 months of training after that, and then assumed the title of Agent Toads, an operations officer for the company. My new partner, a gruff man with a thick southern accent, didn't speak much or reveal anything about his past. For my first assignment, I was told to go to a small office on the topmost floor of the building. I walked in, seeing a man standing there next to the desk, a file in hand. I looked him up and down, seeing a muscular gym rat with blue eyes, a tanned complexion, and very dark hair. He didn't smile, his stony face just observing, seemingly seeing everything. In his black suit, standing 6'3", he made an imposing figure. "I'm Agent Toads, sir," I said, stepping forward to shake his hand. He quickly looked away, pretending not to notice it, and I put it down. "Yeah, I know who you are," he said. "Cut the sir crap. My name is Agent Hudson, or Mark. Since we will probably be killing people together, I assume we should start on a first-name basis, right, Jintao?" A slight smile crossed his lips, a smile that didn't reach his cold, blue eyes. He had the eyes of an executioner. A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt suddenly glad that this man was on my side. "This is our first assignment. Should be easy for a young hot shot like you." He pushed the folder into my chest, hard. I grabbed it, and he started walking out of the room. "Where do we meet?" I asked. He didn't even turn his head. 6 a.m., a car will be sent to your apartment. After that, maybe we'll meet in hell, I don't know. He laughed at his own joke, slamming the door behind him. I pulled the rolling chair back from the desk, putting the folder down. First I went to the break room and made myself a cup of green tea using lots of gyokuro leaves from Japan. Carrying the cup back to the office room, the fragrant steam rising from the cup, I thought of all the possibilities in that folder. It could be a mission to go to the rainforests of Central America, or the jungles of Cambodia, or the vast forests of Siberia. I opened to the first page, my heart beating fast in my chest. I read through the preliminary report quickly, feeling a sense of disappointment. We were to go to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, more commonly called North Korea. The orders said Mark and I would travel to a biological and chemical weapons facility near the Chinese border, find out as much information as we could, and travel back to the rendezvous point. It was fairly short on details from there, and I figured I'd find out more when the time came. I went back home, eating a big meal and getting some sleep, setting my alarm early so I could shower and shave before the CIA car whisked me away, bringing me to new and exciting places. I dreamed that night of endless tundras and open oceans and forests filled with wonder. The car showed up exactly at 6 a.m. I saw Agent Hudson sitting in the passenger seat. An older man, probably in his 60s, sat behind the wheel. I had never seen him before. I got in the back seat. The smell of cologne and air freshener filled the car, a pleasant combination, like vanilla and flowers. I looked at the older man in the rearview mirror. He smiled at me, his dark eyes meeting mine. He stared at me for a long moment. "Agent Stryker recruited you, huh?" he asked, more of a statement than a question. I nodded. "He's a good man, Stryker. He recruited me, too, all those years ago. My name's Al, by the way. I'm semi-retired, but I still drive for the company," he said, using the informal name for the CIA. A lot of people who worked for it simply called it the company or the agency, assuming everyone would know exactly what agency they meant. "Nice to meet you, Al," I said, feeling tired. I had taken a caffeine pill and some ginseng supplements just before I left, but the combination hadn't kicked in yet. I looked up at Mark, who stared out the passenger's side window, not speaking. "Is this your first time in the DPRK?" Al asked. I nodded. "Boy, some crazy shit goes down in that country. My dad was in the Korean War. Have you ever heard of a Gwishin?" I had heard the term, but I didn't really know anything about it. "No, I grew up in the USA. I speak Korean. My family taught it to me, but I don't really know the urban legends," I said. His eyes narrowed as he drove down the highway towards the military airport. "This is no urban legend," he said cryptically. "The Gwishin is real. My dad actually saw one when he was on guard duty. He said he was alone in the watchtower. Their company had taken heavy losses. Usually they had 2 people on guard duty, but until reinforcements arrived, he had to do it alone. He mostly just chain-smoked cigarettes and drank coffee," he said. "Nothing ever really happened. Then one night, something finally did, and it wasn't North Korea behind it. He said he saw women walking out of the trees, each of them in a white funeral gown. They had stringy black hair covering their faces, and he couldn't see their eyes. He didn't even know how they saw to move forward. Their hair went all the way down past their chests, and they seemed, well, strange, inhuman even." He called out broken Korean, telling them this was a military outpost, and they needed to turn around immediately. They just kept walking, going faster and faster now, their movements jerky and unnatural. He knew something was wrong, and he called for backup, turned off the safety on his gun, and started to aim. He called out again, telling them that he would be forced to fire if they didn't stop immediately. They started running towards the guard tower then, a dozen of them, and as they ran, the wind blew the hair back from their faces. He saw they had skulls beneath grinning, bloody skulls with pieces of rotted flesh still hanging off. They were barefoot, and he saw the bones in their feet from where the skin and muscle had worn away. It was eerie how they jerked and limped at such superhuman speeds, he said. He opened fire, but they had reached the ladder of the guard tower. He shot a few, but they kept coming, twisting their bodies unnaturally, dark blood staining their white gowns a black color. He could see straight through some of them, where the bullets had torn through their arms or legs, but they seemed to feel no pain. He started to pray, and he saw rotted, pale hands reaching up from the ladder to the guard tower. Without thinking, he jumped, a fairly long fall, he said, but he rolled and only ended up breaking 3 fingers in his arm and spraining his ankle. In immense pain, he tried to run as fast as he could, and then the reinforcements arrived. By the time they got to the tower, they found only trails of dark, clotted blood, and some stringy black hair still on the deck where my father had been. He stopped talking, taking the exit to the airport. The silence in the car seemed deafening. He pulled up to the gate, showing his identification. The security guard let the gate rise and radioed something from his post. Soon we were pulling up to the jet, and Al was waving goodbye to Agent Hudson and me. "Good luck, new blood," he said to me, "and remember my story wasn't some campfire bullshit. There actually are things in those woods and in that country that aren't normal, and with all their biological and chemical weapons research, it may be much, much worse now." With that, he put his window up, turning the car around and driving away, a blur of black trim and squealing tires shining under the hot summer sun. On the flight over to China, Agent Hudson and I discussed the plan. We would sneak in through the relatively porous Chinese-North Korean border at the exact time when the guards were being changed. We had about a 5-minute window where the departing guard would brief the arriving guard in the station watchtower before coming back out. Moreover, we would be armed with various weapons, in addition to the Glock 30 I always carried in my shoulder holster under my suit. On the plane, we had 2 Heckler and Koch HK-416 rifles, equipped with both fully automatic and semi-automatic switches. We had pre-filled magazines with dum-dums, special bullets that would expand on impact and create catastrophic tissue injuries in any enemies we encountered. In addition, we had grenades, lots of round, blue M67s that would fragment and explode across an area 40 feet wide. And we had 2 very small guns with special needles filled with atropine, a quick-acting opioid usually used to sedate elephants or large mammals that would instantly put down any normal human. We also had opioid antagonists so that the person wouldn't stop breathing after receiving atropine. If we found any North Korean scientists or high-ranking officials and we thought we could take them out alive, we were supposed to try using the tranquilizer gun, though this was a secondary priority. If we could get them close to the border, then a few auxiliary agents would be in place to grab the hostage from us. The North Korean border guard could be killed if the hostage was deemed valuable enough. This was all off the books, and if we were captured and tortured, the US would immediately deny any involvement or knowledge and say we were lone wolves or mercenaries. Before we knew it, we were landing in China in an airfield surrounded by lush trees. A Chinese driver who didn't speak a lick of English was there, waiting. He took off quickly. I looked back at the sleek metal jet, wondering if I would see it again. He dropped us off seemingly in the middle of nowhere. We were on a deserted dirt road, with deep potholes and large stones scattered all over. Next to us, a thick, dark green forest loomed, rising up into the mountains that stood like watching giants overhead. I knew somewhere in that mountain range, the border between China and North Korea stood, and then our mission and the killing would begin. Though this happened 2 months ago, I still remember the eerie sensation that crawled over me then, as if my intuition knew of the horrors I would encounter that day. We had changed into camouflage suits before leaving the plane. The patches on the cloth, shades of black, green and dark green, were designed to match the flora in this region. Without hesitation, Agent Hudson began to tramp off in the woods, leaving the dirt trail behind. We didn't talk on the walk. He checked an electronic compass in his pocket, seemingly adept at reading the bizarre, constantly changing numbers on the screen. He would occasionally stop behind a tree, pull out the electronic compass, then slightly change paths again. Soon, I saw a small clearing with a watchtower up ahead. Looking to my left and right, from our vantage point high on the mountains, I saw more watchtowers peeking up from the North Korean terrain. They went on as far as eyes could see, spaced out in the thick forest, their tops rising above the trees like snake heads rising out of a pit. "This is the crossing point," he whispered. "Be ready for anything." I nodded grimly and we walked forward. I took out my binoculars and I saw the shape of a man on top of the tower. I was about to motion to Agent Hudson, but he had already seen it. He peered through his binoculars, frowning. "Should we cross if there's still someone up there?" I asked. I thought this was supposed to be the changing of the guard. He looked at me strangely. "Look again," he whispered. I took out my binoculars and really inspected the figure, though in the dying light of the day, it was hard to make out details. But after 5 or 6 seconds, I had seen and realized enough. The man, wearing a North Korean military uniform, had been crucified against the watchtower, his eyes cut out and his skin peeled off. Someone must have skinned him alive and then put the uniform back on his mutilated body. We walked forward slowly, our HK-416 rifles raised. Soon we reached the watchtower and found no one around it. We walked slowly up the stairs, making as little noise as possible, expecting an ambush. I came to the top of the tower and found the man's corpse with thick nails driven through his wrists and ankles. He hung from the wall around the topmost room of the tower, his head drooping. I saw letters written behind him in Korean, thick lines of black paint, and I looked and beheld a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. "That's the book of Revelation," Agent Hudson started to say when the corpse twisted violently and inhaled. The muscles on its skinned body writhed as it pulled against the nails, sending thick gouts of blood streaming down from its body, snapping its teeth, its lipless mouth opening and closing with loud clacking sounds. It tried to lunge at me. Instinctively, I backed away, but the nails, driven deep into the thick wood, had kept the corpse attached. "Oh God," I whispered, pulling out my pistol and pointing it at the head of the writhing body. "No," Agent Hudson said, his voice fierce and commanding. "Don't fire any guns unless necessary. The sound could draw attention. It could draw the whole damn North Korean military. Just leave it there. We have a mission, after all." My head seemed to clear and I put the pistol away. We walked back into the tower and started descending the stairs, the corpse still gnashing and snapping its teeth at the air as we left. Our plan was to go straight to the biological weapons laboratory after moving through the Chinese-North Korean border, but our plans went quickly awry when dozens of North Korean soldiers ran by in their brownish-gray uniforms. We were coming out of the watchtower, and thankfully we were far higher up in the mountains than the soldiers winding their way up the dirt road below. They only had one car, and the rest tried to run next to it. The car billowed out black smoke and gave the entire surrounding area a smell of burning and sulfur. All the soldiers I could see were extremely thin with sunken eyes and prominent cheekbones. They looked like they hadn't seen a good meal in years, and since this was North Korea, they probably hadn't. But they still were armed and far outnumbered us. We were supposed to use stealth to complete the mission, not raw force. A North Korean informant had given us the code to enter the biological weapons facility, and we would be entering at the slowest time of the day when the fewest staff members were present. We would still have to kill any guards we encountered. However, change of plans, Agent Hudson said, pointing to a deer trail that went in the opposite direction of the approaching North Korean troops. "There's a small border town nearby where we can hide temporarily until the military clears off the road." "There's no other way?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not that I know of," he said. "Our planned route follows that road. We could lay low for a couple hours, then come back and check out the area. Try not to be seen by any civilians, though. They are all spies for the regime. These people turn in their own neighbors for an extra bowl of rice. Hell, half of them are eating snakes and rats and grass just to survive. They probably earn $1,000 a year at most. They would bring us right to the torture chamber if they caught sight of us." "Yeah, I figured," I said. "So, are we just not going to talk about what we saw back there?" Agent Hudson stopped suddenly, giving me a severe look. His blue eyes looked me up and down coldly. "Okay, then talk about it," he said. The statement caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond to it. Well, I mean, you have more experience than me. I was wondering what you thought, I said. The trees around us rustled in the slight mountain breeze, the air smelling sweet and clean. I looked past Agent Hudson and could see for dozens of miles into the North Korean countryside. Quaint, small villages dotted the landscape, with dirt roads snaking their way through the thick trees. Far off in the distance, from the direction of the watchtower, we heard yelling, and from a different direction, dogs started barking. Ah shit, Agent Hudson said. Let's pick up the pace. They have tracking dogs, I think. I don't know if they'll pick up our scent and follow us, or whether they'll catch the trail of whoever actually did that horrible crap skinning the man alive, and all that. But our trail is fresh, so I'm not liking our odds. He began to speed walk, pulling out the electronic compass and reading it as he went. From our view high up on the mountain, I could see a little town not far away. Agent Hudson did too, and he quickly pocketed the electronic compass. Okay, I know where we are, he said. Don't need that anymore. So are you going to answer my question? I asked. He walked fast beside me, breathing hard, a slight sheen of perspiration showing on his face. I don't have an answer for you, Jintao, he said calmly. Do you think I know everything strange and unusual we'll encounter just because I've been in this job a few years? But no, I don't know what's going on. I've never seen anything like that before, and I hope, for both our sakes, that we never see it again. What do you think about what Al said about biological and chemical weapons? I said. Do you think maybe they tested out some new agent and it got out? I think the most likely answer is that the man we saw wasn't actually dead. He might have looked dead when we first got there, but I've seen lots of people who looked dead and weren't. Even being skinned alive, you can live for a while. Maybe he was in a stupor or a catatonic state from all the pain and shock he must have suffered. Maybe they gave that soldier some drug or chemical agent so he wouldn't feel pain, but it's not like we saw Lazarus rising out of the grave. In my book, all we saw was a dying, crazed man nailed to the wall. He stopped speaking, the dogs sounding much closer now. We had almost made it to the village. It looked fairly empty, though I saw a feral-looking, extremely skinny cat skulking around a nearby residence. As we entered the town, I realized just how dilapidated and shoddy the small houses and huts here looked. The one on the edge of the forest with the cat in the yard literally had holes in the roof, and the windows were broken and covered over with paper. No power lines ran to any of the houses. I thought to myself how cold and miserable the winters must be here without electricity or central heating. As if on cue, an old woman came hobbling out of the house, stooping down to pet the cat. She looked tiny, no more than 5 feet, and had an old-fashioned red satin dress covering her thin, shaking frame. She looked up at us with bleary eyes, the whites looking like yellowed jelly. She had a hunchback look and took small, tottering steps as she leaned heavily on her wooden cane. After staring at us in surprise for a few long moments, she smiled, showing her few remaining teeth, spread out in her mouth like lone sentries scattered across a war zone. "Are you with the tour group?" she asked in Korean. I immediately answered, smiling. "Yes, we got separated, I'm afraid," I said. She gave me a suspicious look, then she motioned for me to come inside the house. "Well, come in," she said, "and I'll get you food and water. Maybe we can find a way to get you back to your group." "That'd be wonderful," I said. Agent Hudson understood some Korean, but not much. I translated the conversation for him, and he grunted in assent. "I'm not eating any of this damn North Korean food," he said. "It's probably all cats and dogs. Did you know the North Korean government put up posters all around the towns saying to eat dog meat in the summertime because it cools you down? In reality, they just wanted free food for their people, and slaughtering wild dogs is one more way to give it." I followed the old woman through the battered, cracked front door of the house. Inside, I saw a home that only someone in extreme poverty could love. A dirty, chipped table stood in the middle of the kitchen. A fire roared in the collapsing fireplace. Most of the bricks that composed it were either loose, fractured, or missing entirely. Above the fire, I saw a black, metal pot. There was an odor of rotting wood and mold. I also smelled something strange coming from the pot, a smell almost like green tea. I walked over and looked in, inhaling deeply. In the boiling water, I saw only grass clippings and a dead snake being cooked together for a disgusting broth. I looked up sharply at the woman. who didn't seem to notice my revulsion. "You eat this?" I asked the old woman, who smiled wanly. "When we can catch snakes or rats to eat, we do," she replied. "Otherwise it is just grass and rotten cabbage from the government, along with powdered milk sometimes or rice. But you can't count on the rations coming in. They've been cut and then cut again until we feel constantly hungry." "What's your name?" I asked. "Heejin," she said, bowing curtly. I wondered whether this woman was a friend or a liability. I certainly didn't want to kill her, and I also didn't want to risk her running out to inform the authorities of our presence immediately after we left. I could see these same thoughts passing through Agent Hudson's mind, his face turning stony as he looked down at her. "I'm Jintao and this is Mark," I said, purposefully not giving her our full names. "Have you seen anything strange around here lately? We found a corpse in the woods that appeared to be not fully dead." Her eyes widened at this and she uttered a short gasp. "We had that during the arduous march, the famine that killed millions," she said. "Some of the people who starved came back, and they were rabid, biting, totally insane. Nothing was left of their humanity. They were just agents of hunger who went around eating the living." "And what about the line?" And I looked and beheld a pale horse. "Have you ever heard that before?" I asked. She broke eye contact, looking down and to the left, hesitating for a long moment. "No, I'm sorry," she said. "In North Korea, Bibles could get you a death sentence or life in a concentration camp, so I doubted if she would have known the reference anyway, but something in her demeanor suggested that she knew more than she had said. I wondered if this was just paranoia from the stressful situation, or whether I was actually seeing it. As I relayed the conversation to Agent Hudson in full, I heard dogs barking outside and men calling orders. The heavy thud of many booted feet echoed from the dirt road through the village, and it seemed to be growing nearer by the second. Before I knew what was happening, I saw Agent Hudson take out his tranquilizer gun and shoot a dart into her stomach. She looked down, confused, then frowned. With seconds, she began to waver on her feet. "Oh," she said, falling. Agent Hudson scooped her up in his arms as the knocks came from the front door loud and insistent. Soldiers yelled in North Korean, stating that enemy agents had infiltrated the area and a search was underway. Agent Hudson ran to the bedroom, throwing the woman down on the threadbare mattress. I heard crashing from the front and back of the house, and heavy boots began to thud on the wooden floors. Without thinking, Agent Hudson and I took refuge in a closet in the bedroom, shutting the door quietly behind us though leaving a slit to see outside. And we waited for the men to come in and discover us with guns drawn and take us to the torture chamber. Thank you to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacy, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I look forward to making more content for everyone.